F1's second tier has gone through a multitude of changes in its lifetime. It started life as Formula 2, then became Formula 3000, which begs the question of what happened to the 2,997 formulas in between, rebranded into GP2 before circling back around to become Formula 2 once again, at least until next Tuesday when the FIA will presumably relaunch it as just Keith. Just as confusing as that rolling remarketing has been the progression of drivers from that secondary division into the top tier of Formula 1. Logically, every driver who has won that junior title would be promoted to the first division of motorsport. Consider it in other sporting terms, it would be unthinkable for Leicester City to be denied promotion to the Premier League because those higher up feel they wouldn't be good enough. So why has that scenario played out so many times in Formula 2? Sometimes, as recently as 2024, there just aren't any seats available. You can't be promoted if, rightly or wrongly, no one is getting relegated in your place. But if a seat is available, there are plenty of reasons why a champion could be overlooked in favour of another. Money, specifically one bringing substantially more than the other, is the most common factor. Factory alignment is another. If a seat pops open at V-Carb Alfa Toro Minardi, do you think they'd take a champion with Mercedes backing, or the chap who finished 6th but has a pair of red bovines on their cap? Most ludicrous of all, sometimes promotions don't happen because a championship win is deemed not impressive enough. Yes, sneer the senior authorities of all things motor racing, you did win, but you didn't do it in the right time frame, or you didn't do it in the right way. As if something like age or win ratios should lessen the value of a championship title. The reason I'm going off on an early rant like this isn't just because I haven't had my morning coffee, although that should always be considered a factor. It's because I'm thinking of the protagonist of today's video. Imagine you are, statistically speaking at least, the best F2 driver ever. You've not only won that title, but you could have conceivably won it multiple times over. In the category's near 60-year history, you've won more races in it than anyone else. So what's the next port for that scintillating ship of success? F1 World Champion? Grand Prix winner? Even just a Hulkenberg-esque midfield journeyman could still be fitting. What wouldn't be appropriate would be never getting a fair shake in the Premier class. Despite your best efforts, approximately half the field turn you down, and the one team that does pick you does so half-heartedly at the last minute and proceeds to throw you into the worst environment for a budding young racer before unceremoniously turfing you out. And don't worry if your imagination can't stretch that far, because one man can visualise that scenario perfectly. Meet Giorgio Pantano. We have an issue before we even start this video, and that's that there's seemingly not enough superlatives in all the world to describe how good young Pantano was. Fernando Alonso has described him as an invincible, incredible talent, and fellow champions Jenson Button and Nico Rosberg have concurred, declaring him one of the best driving talents they ever witnessed, Rosberg going so far as to have a poster of the Italian in his childhood bedroom. Other words like phenomenon and superstar are also thrown about with reckless abandon, with good reason too. From 1993 to 1999, Will Buxton recalls him dominating the karting world in a manner never seen before or since. He racked up 8 titles, 3 Italian, 3 European and 2 World Championships. It was a widely regarded consensus by F1's movers and shakers that here was a kid who would change everything. Via part-time efforts in Formula Parma Audi and Euro Open by Nissan at the tail end of '99, the next year he entered his first full season of single-seater racing in German Formula 3, and with 3 wins and 7 further podiums he duly took the title in his rookie year. The hype levels continued to grow, and there were suggestions he could follow the likes of fellow championship alumni Jarno Trulli, Jos Verstappen, or some chap by the name of Michael Schumacher into an F1 drive the very next year. Instead, he made his first steps into Formula 3000 with the excellently named Team Astromega, who had helped unearth talents like Alonso and Gonzalo Rodriguez in recent years. The majority of the year was more Astro minor for Giorgio, as this graduation proved a steep learning curve. yet his raw speed was on show as he set the fastest lap on 3 occasions before claiming victory on home soil to vault him into the top 10 in the final standings. Plans to race for the regularly race-winning Supernova in 2002 fell through, but he promptly starred for Coloni. In 5 years of racing in F1's second tier, the Italian outfit had been as front-running as the UK at Eurovision, but Pantano took 3 wins with them and battled for the title with another pair of F1 graduates in Sébastien Bourdais and Thomas Engay, finishing just 2 points shy of the Frenchman. A title challenge was hotly tipped for the next year with a switch to Durango, and though he took 2 more wins, he would have to settle for 3rd overall, well adrift of dominant series winner Bjorn Verdheim. After 3 years with a silver and bronze medal to boot, Giorgio was insistent he wouldn't be returning for a 4th attempt at snatching that junior crown. With 6 wins to his name, only F1 mainstays Juan Pablo Montoya and Nick Heidfeld had won more in the category, and Pantano had done so by dragging unsuccessful outfits further up the field than they'd ever been previously. Yet there were still queries over whether he deserved a promotion. The other black and white statistics crudely read 3 years, 0 titles. As Autosport's David Cameron put it, if a driver hasn't won it in his 2nd year, then the men who count tend to look elsewhere. With the F1 grid for 2004 swiftly filling up, it looked like the F1 boat had sailed on by. But that's not to say there hadn't been chances to hop on board. You can scroll back to the year 2000 to see the name Giorgio Pantano floating in conversations around an F1 drive. That year, 20-year-old Jenson Button had successfully graduated from F3 to F1 to much aplomb, and now everyone was on the prowl for a junior starlet of their own, with the likes of Kimi Räikkönen and Felipe Massa soon to be amongst those to leap from obscurity to stardom. To that end, in May, Pantano and another member of the historic Troubled Talents Club, Antonio Pizzonia, were invited to test with Benetton in Spain. Speculation suggested race driver Alex Wurz would be out of a drive, if not at year's end, then within a few weeks, and either of these baby-faced assassins could be next in line. At Jerez, his first time in an F1 car, Giorgio lapped 4 seconds adrift of the more seasoned Wurz, and had whittled that gap down to 2.5 seconds the next day before spinning off. A few days later in Valencia, his best time was just a second shy of the better-rated Benetton boy Giancarlo Fisichella. A report from Crash.net stated, Benetton may have unearthed a star of the future, whilst technical director Pat Simmons also confessed himself pleased with Giorgio's performance. But the race seat instead went to Button and a test role to Mark Webber. It's rumoured that team principal Flavio Briatore wanted to take over Pantano's management, but was rebuffed by his existing manager and backer, Lars Christian Brask. Things could well have been very different with Flavio in his corner. With the aforementioned trend of fast-forwarding youngsters into F1 in full flow, there's every chance Giorgio could have been in F1 for 2001, at an outfit building towards championship success just 4 years later. The flip side is it would have involved navigating 2001 first and the blundering Benetton B201, a car that nearly ended the career of Button and would have been more than a handful for a rookie. Even Pantano has later admitted the whole adventure came too early for him, and that realistically, I didn't have enough experience to test an F1 car. F1 may well have chewed him up and spat him out then and there. Still, the F1 paddock had taken note, and by Christmas time, fresh off his German F3 success, Pantano's name was scribbled onto the nice list of one Alain Prost, seeking a young driver for his outfit the next year. He, Pizzonia, and a myriad of other names were linked to a seat that was eventually shuffled more thoroughly than a deck of cards. A test session was strongly mooted, but never materialised. Given the problems of Prost that year, that was probably a good thing. Come the new year, the Italian media were cranking out reports that Pantano would be testing for Ferrari, but it was McLaren who put him behind the wheel of his second F1 car during a private 2-day test in Jerez, alongside Gary Paffett and Darren Turner. They were allegedly evaluating him for a spot as second test driver, although Pantano has since refuted this, stating it was a test with no project behind it, just for the sake of testing. With no data available, it's hard to know how Pantano got on, but the absence of any offer or quotes from McLaren at the time, plus a cold statement from Brask stating it's not right for us to comment on McLaren's affairs, doesn't fill one with confidence that things went as well as they did with Benetton. In August 2002, he tested for Minardi at Donington for the excellently named Thunder in the Park 2 event, but it wouldn't be till year's end that Pantano got to drive an F1 car in anger again, when in December he and member number 3 of the Troubled Talents Club, Vitantonio Liuzzi, both tested for Williams in Valencia in a shootout for a testing role. With over 100 laps under his belt, Giorgio was just 4/10 off regular test driver Marc Genet. Senior operations engineer Sam Michael declared Pantano had done a good job, and driver manager Jonathan Williams praised his adaptability and speed. Yet once again, no F1 offers came forward. The role went to Brazilian Ricardo Sperafico, who, according to Liuzzi, brought a lot of budget. Had Giorgio got it, he could well have been in the same position as another Williams tester, Pizzonia, who raced for Williams as a substitute in 04 and 05. Annoying as another missed opportunity was, perhaps most worrying was that Giorgio had tested for 4 outfits, been linked with 2 others, and still had the princely sum of 0 deals in his back pocket. If he really was the next big thing, people pondered, surely someone would have taken him on by now. Thankfully, though, it looked like 7th time would be the charm. Looking ahead to 2004, Giorgio could spot a shiny F1 contract dangling before his nose. There was a vacancy going at Ford Works outfit Jaguar, and Pantano was front and centre of the queue. The long-awaited promotion was about to fall into place, until everything else fell apart instead. 2 days before he was due to sign, Pantano received a call to inform him that Christian Klein, armed with $10 million of sponsorship from Red Bull, had skipped the line to the front of the queue. With no time to scrounge together anything close to that amount, Pantano's luck with F1 contracts was now stretched to a miserable 0-7. Jaguar were far from frontrunners in 2004 and entering what would be their final year in F1, but they were still a more competitive force than what Pantano would be forced to settle with. As Giorgio began to shuffle back to the job market, his ears pricked up at the sound of the faintest of explosions, the telltale sign of a negotiation implosion. The source of all that racket was Jordan, with what seemed a straightforward signing of veteran Jos Verstappen slowly unravelling, with Jordan and Jos's manager Herb Rothengarter clashing heads, and Verstappen refusing to attend a seat-fitting or fitness assessment. It was the latest of notices, but there was still one last shot at an F1 seat. Brass kept calling, and on the 5th of February, the Verstappen-Jordan talks officially collapsed. By the 8th, BBC 5 Live were reporting a deal with Pantano was close to being concluded. 2 days later, Pantano became the first driver other than the already confirmed Nick Heidfeld to test the EJ14 and lapped within 0.2 of the German. On Valentine's Day, Jordan officially declared they were choosing Giorgio Pantano, making him the last driver to be confirmed on the grid. The Guardian reported he brought with him about £3 million worth of sponsorship, though that wasn't the sole reason for his signing. Jordan declared, Giorgio performed consistently with accomplished racecraft at the front of the field for 3 years in Formula 3000, and he's ready for the challenge in F1. I believe we have the best combination of youth, experience, and natural ability. Giorgio and Nick are seriously quick, skilled, and hungry for success, which is exactly what we need to rejuvenate the team and lead Jordan's fight back. Giorgio declared that Jordan is a good team to be with for my first year, and I think this is a team where I can learn quite quickly and where I can come quite quickly on a high level. If we look at the pros and cons of joining Jordan in 2004, then a quick stroll into the positive pub for a swift pint of glass half full optimism would tell us that Jordan were well regarded as an excellent starting point for developing young drivers, with the likes of the Schumacher brothers, Rubens Barrichello and Eddie Irvine all starting their F1 tenures there. This is a team with a big tradition, launching great drivers and winning, quipped Giorgio. Jordan is a good environment for me. I can learn from them and from my teammate Nick. As recently as 1999, they had been championship challengers and race winners with fellow Italian Giancarlo Fisichella in 2003, who had spent his formative years with Jordan too. Whilst they had slumped to 9th in the Constructors the previous year, that was in part a reflection on the new point system which now awarded points to the top 8 rather than the traditional top 6. Under the old point system, Jordan would have actually been a respectable 5th. Trouble was, it wasn't. With that came a number of troubles, namely a significant lack of prize money going into some already dwindling coffers, as one of two teams without any form of manufacturer backing. Sponsorship was as minimalist as an art gallery, as illustrated by numerous peace messages across the engine cover rather than any budding business partners. More money had been poured away when Jordan tried and failed to sue Vodafone over an alleged breach of contract, whilst talks of a partnership with Mercedes and Smart had come to naught. In the 2004 preview guide, Martin Brundle openly questioned whether Jordan would make the whole season, or even the first race. The lack of funds, unsurprisingly, had a knock-on effect with the new EJ14 car, which was less new car and more last year's model with some extra bits tacked on. It was amongst the last to emerge from the factories and was branded with Lazarus on the side, in an attempt to make light of their precarious future. Though it supposedly had the same engines as Jaguar, Jordan has claimed that the Jordan versions were several horsepower down on what the Black Cats were producing. Circling back to the aforementioned positives, even they had several amendments after them. Race winners in 2003, asterisks in one of F1's most chaotic events. Talent nurturers, except in the case of their rookies of the previous 2 years, Takuma Sato and Ralph Furman, who had been as swiftly fired as they'd been hired. That glass of half full was quickly souring by the minute. Then there was the lateness of the deal itself. The date the deal was struck might have been romantic, but there was nothing to love about how last minute it was, with the season opener in Australia coming just 3 weeks after that. It meant Giorgio had about as much preparation time as a bake-off technical challenge. Heidfeld had been testing with Jordan since December and had completed nearly 650 laps. Pantano, meanwhile, only stepped into the cockpit 3 months after that and recorded just over 200 laps. Compare that to fellow rookie Clean, who had pounded the circuit since November to the tune of over 1,000 laps. That added to an uphill battle to adapt to F1 after a long while in Formula 3000. It's entirely another car and you cannot compare, said Giorgio, noting the huge difference between the two series in terms of power and braking. I think I am nearly there to understand all this, he said. I am probably not 100%. Maybe in 3 races I will be? Still, when the curtains opened on the new season in Australia, Autosport reported that Pantano was in a blissful state of disbelief all weekend, with a permanent smile creasing his face. Soon that smile would be turning upside down. For all the superlatives thrown about during his junior career, the reviews of his first F1 race ranged from unspectacular to disappointing for a man of his experience. He was 2 seconds adrift of Heidfeld in qualifying, comfortably the largest margin between all the teammates. What followed was a steady plod to 14th and last the next day, 3 laps down on race winner Schumacher. Though Giorgio had achieved his target of finishing his first race, and admitted he would be taking the first few races easy to allow him to warm up to F1, as F1 Rejects put it, that doesn't give him a license to underperform. After missing first qualifying in Malaysia with a gearbox problem, then running in the second in the spare car, which partly excused the 3.4 second gap to Heidfeld, he received the quote-unquote honour of being the first driver to suffer the now commonplace 10-place grid penalty for changing his engine. Starting from the pit lane, within a few corners of the race he span, before trundling home 13th, 2 laps down. Giorgio called it a consistent race. Others less kind deemed it greatly disappointing. Perhaps assisted by a new track at Bahrain making a more level playing field, Pantano was the closest to his teammate he'd been so far. From his best Friday performance, 13th of the 25 runners, he wound up just half a second shy of his teammate in qualifying, before a 3rd straight finish the next day, nearly a lap behind Heidfeld. I did my best, said Giorgio. The feeling is coming now. For the first time there was faint praise in the presses for him too, with Adam Cooper writing, he looked a little more at home. Though it had been an underwhelming start, there was hope that, having navigated a trio of unfamiliar circuits and taken the time to get into the F1 groove, a return to Europe where he'd pounded through so many of those circuits in the junior series would spark Giorgio's F1 tenure into life. Still, that didn't stop the yearly tradition of driver market rumours kick-starting in Imola, with the suggestion that Giorgio would be bundled out in favour of either Jordan test driver Timo Glock or a Jos Verstappen-shaped boomerang. But Pantano bounced back with aplomb. He outqualified Heidfeld for the first time and briefly outraced the German too, before stopping early on with a hydraulics problem. After his strongest weekend yet, and with the F1 circus rolling into Catalunya, which Giorgio deemed one of my favourite circuits and one I'm always quick at, it looked like things might finally be moving in the right direction. Now to just copy and paste the glowing report from Autosport into this part of the scripts? Pantano's performance was nothing but disappointing. Once more he was well adrift of Heidfeld, a messy final qualifying lap leaving him nearly 3 seconds slower. He made up 3 places at the start, but soon the hydraulic gremlins re-emerged, culminating in retiring from the back after 51 laps. Worse yet, there was the news that Verstappen would be testing for Jordan within the next month. Indeed, the only positive was that it was supposedly Heidfeld he'd now be ejecting, thanks to a lack of funds the German was providing. Jordan finally grabbed their first points of the year in Monaco as a host of crashes and calamities left just 9 cars running at the end, and Heidfeld was the 7th of those, picking up 2 precious points. Though Pantano had once again struggled to match his teammates' pace, in part hobbled with a broken meniscus, there was every chance he could have been in the points too, retiring from 11th after 13 laps with a gearbox issue. Head of engineering James Robinson certainly felt so, stating, "Giorgio was running well and would have had a good crack at the points today, given the carnage out there." Europe brought the good news that Verstappen had been unable to fit inside the EJ14, and the threat of him hamburgling either Jordan driver out of his seat was now almost non-existent. On track, Pantano drew closer to Heidfeld with a last-gasp error in qualifying, losing him time, before a drive-through penalty and downshift problems hampered any hopes of a decent race. A shame, given Jordan were described as looking genuinely competitive, for once. The team arrived in Canada for first practice, but conspicuously, Pantano did not. It was written off as due to personal circumstances, but then second practice ticked by and still, no Pantano. It soon emerged those personal circumstances were Pantano's sponsors defaulting on a payment to Jordan, and Eddie wasted no time in dropping Giorgio and inserting Glock for the remainder of the weekend. Timo promptly finished 11th, already 2 places higher than Pantano had managed all year, and then received the bumper bonus of seeing both Williams's and Toyota's disqualified, vaulting him up the order to 7th and 2 points banked on his debut. It was rotten luck for Giorgio, who could well have been in that position, if not for matters out of his control. Instead, Glock became the heralded understudy, Pantano the underachieving main star. Back in the car for the US Grand Prix, more points went begging once more through no fault of Giorgio's. 2/10 shy of Nick in qualifying, he nipped past the German at the start, but then Klein tapped Cristiano de Matter and the Austrian spun right into Pantano and Massa. They were the first of many retirements that day, with just 8 still circulating at the end, including the ever-pondering Zolt Baumgartner. You have to feel that with Giorgio's 1.5 second advantage over the Hungarian in qualifying, he could have taken that final point with a bit more luck at the first corner. Now it was back to Europe for a run of 6 circuits, 4 of which he'd won at in Formula 3000, and the other 2 he'd taken podiums at. But after potential points from 3 of the last 4 rounds, rather than spurring Pantano on, it was back to the regularly scheduled programming of anonymity and disappointment. He was last in France, having, quote, made no impression whatsoever bar a drive-through penalty. More positive was qualifying in Britain, beating Heidfeld for just the 3rd time and starting a career-best 14th. That was all undone the next day with 2 amateurish spins, the second taking him out of the race. The knives were back out in the presses for Giorgio, stating he was living on borrowed time as a Grand Prix driver. His next 3 outings proved to be a trio of rare and fleeting bright spots. In Germany, he outqualified Heidfeld again, even despite issues in practice limiting him to just 4 laps beforehand, then had the measure of his teammate on race day before a flat tyre caused him to drop down the order. And just to really stick the knife in, received another flat tyre not long before the race end. He was just 2/10 shy of Nick in Hungarian qualifying, but race day was chock-a-block with gearbox issues, which forced him off track twice before the day came to an end on lap 48. He was a mighty 14th in first qualifying for Belgium, beating the likes of the Toyotas and Klein, and just 5,000th shy of Mark Webber. But then 4 seconds went AWOL from his lap time in second qualifying despite the track being drier then, and he slumped down to 19th behind even the Minardis. On lap 1 he arrived at the top of Eau Rouge to find those Minardis tangling with one another, and Pantano had nowhere to go then into Gianmaria Bruni's broken car. Only 10 cars reached the finish, and Giorgio lamented, "I had the chance of doing a really good race today." The end of the European leg of the season brought Giorgio and Jordan to his home race in Monza, and it was another series of messy moments for the Italian. Early Friday promise was shot down by a clumsy clatter into Baumgartner during Saturday practice, and then he pushed too hard in qualifying, running wide at Ascari. Race day lasted 33 laps when he tumbled out of the race whilst running 15th to his own confusion. "I think perhaps I found some water or something on the track and the car just suddenly spun." It turned out to be an ending on par with a Game of Thrones finale. Pantano's sponsorship money, which had been slowly dripping away for a while, had finally dried up. His family went as far as placing their home up as collateral for a bank loan to ensure their son could finish the season, but Giorgio took a look at the final trio of circuits, none of which he knew where any better results were unlikely to sprout up. "For my family, I said no. That's it," reflected Pantano. Within days, his Jordan contract was terminated, and his first F1 foray was over. By year's end, he'd done even better than Valtteri Bottas, ranking 24th in a 20-car championship. With better luck, he could have scored 4 points, climbing to the dizzying heights of 16th ahead of Heidfeld. There's not a lot in the grand scheme of things, but given Jordan as a whole only scored 5 points total, it would have been a welcome and eye-catching bounty. We have pondered some what-ifs already, and it's worth discussing just what could have been in 2004 had he been able to snag that Jaguar seat. "That could have been a big opportunity for me," laments Giorgio. "There was a big difference between Jaguar and Jordan. As we've learned in the past, Jaguar at the best of times, let alone in its final uninterested, underfunded season, was not an operation worth touching with a several-foot barge pole. Yet despite that, it was still infinitely more competitive than what Jordan could offer that year. If we compare the qualifying performances of Klein, arguably the lower end of what Jaguar could perform at, and Heidfeld, vice versa at Jordan, there was still on average a second's gap between the two. Out of interest, I went back over Giorgio's qualifying results that year and whittled off that extra second of performance he could have gained. And you want to know what difference it would have made? The majority of the time it would have translated to either a solitary grid place higher or no change at all. If we're preparing a defence for Giorgio, this discovery is not a particularly welcome piece of evidence. The counter-argument is that had he got that Jaguar seat, he would have had more time in the car, approximately 800 testing laps more, and therefore been closer to the pace. Webber in the other Jaguar was on average nearly 2 seconds faster than Heidfeld on a Saturday. Give Giorgio that same 2 seconds performance, and you get a driver more regularly circling around the top 6 rows and in with a chance of some points. A lack of dollary dues denied that reality, and Eddie Jordan has suggested that part of the Pantano problem was to do with the money Giorgio was bringing to the team. I think with Giorgio, the financial requirement that was made on his family was always on his mind, recalled Eddie in 2011. For sure, he was very talented, but things became a little bit difficult for him, and I think that had a remarkable downward effect on his ability. A mental strain like that would not have been assisted by having your butt routinely kicked by your teammate. Heidfeld had gone from rising star to the job centre within 4 years, and arrived at Jordan highly motivated to make an impression and clamber back up the field. F1 Racing Stuart Codling recounts witnessing Heidfeld behind the wheel of that Jordan, and how he was spectacularly quick by comparison, hands a blur of motion at the wheel. Add to that motivation substantially more time in the car, and you can go some way to understanding why Pantano, to quote Cooper, looked more like an Alex Young than a guy who was still potentially good enough for a top seat somewhere. Pantano's race engineer Dominic Harlow points the finger of blame squarely at how ill-suited Formula 3000 was for preparing new F1 stars. I don't think anybody is ready for F1 when they arrive in terms of what's available to them with setup and what differences you can make to the car. To be honest, the Formula 3000 car back then was a heap of shit, so to come into something with all the electronics and downforce, unless you've got a degree in engineering, you're just not going to understand it. And who could really understand something like the EJ14, a last gasp, underfunded, underpowered offering? Though there were numerous reasons which explained why the long-awaited F1 promotion had soured so quickly, the harsh statistics showed two unrefutable facts. One, he had failed to demonstrate an ability to drive an F1 car quickly. And two, he had failed to demonstrate an ability to pay for the opportunity to do so. Two big no-nos for any budding racer, so it was no surprise that talks with Minardi came to nothing, and not even an F1 testing role came his way for 2005. Instead, as Formula 3000 clicked refresh to begin life anew as GP2, Pantano trod a hasty path to his old stomping grounds, hopeful of rebooting his own tale. It may have seemed a panicked and desperate move, but it was one with merit to it. Returning to the lower series would soon become a viable means by which one could relaunch their F1 career. Romain Grosjean endured a nightmare promotion to F1 in 2009, but a return to GP2 a year later produced a title the year after that, and then a healthy 9-year stay in the top flight with a generous helping of podiums to boot. Giorgio's Jordan stablemate Glock was another shining example of that mentality, working out for the best. It wasn't an unreasonable concept that despite his struggles, Giorgio could bounce back and be given a second bite of the F1 cherry. Perhaps struggling to adapt back into the junior categories, it took Giorgio some time to warm up. A single pole position and second place was all he had to shout about in the first half of the year, but he came roaring back with 5 podiums in the latter half to rank 6th. Had he replicated that form across the first half of the year, he could have been 3rd. Most impressive that year was a brief sojourn into IndyCar, a 2-race deal with the legendary Chip Ganassi outfit with a view towards a drive there in 2006. He fit the mould of drivers we'd had in the past like Montoya and Junqueira, recounts Ganassi managing director Mike Hull. We wanted to try him out and he did a heck of a job for us. With no experience of the car, series or circuits, he was a mistake away from pole position on debut and a clumsy manoeuvre from Vitor Meira from a top 10 result there too. By outing 2, he was just 2/100ths from pole, and though his inexperience showed as he fell down the order early on, he carved through from 18th to a strong 4th. Hull said he was really a terrific driver, no question about it. Whilst Ganassi chimed in, not only was he diligent technically, he was also professional. No baggage, no Hollywood, just down to business. And fast. In many ways, it was as impressive as another couple of junior gems had been upon their migration to America in Montoya and Bourdais. Giorgio admits an IndyCar career wasn't his main aim, but if I had to change career, I would take it. If you're playing the patented mobile chicane drinking game and taking a shot every time a promising opportunity for Pantano came to naught, then feel free to load up your next glass of Sambuca. At the latest of last minutes, champion Dan Weldon became available for hire, and his clear talents and experience in America, particularly on oval courses, made him a no-brainer pick over the unproven Pantano. Holding out for an IndyCar or Champ Car seat meant all slots on the GP2 grid were filled by the time he returned to Europe, but when a spot opened up at old stomping partners Coloni, now branded Fisichella Motorsports, Pantano was soon back up to speed, winning in France before a brilliant pair of wins at the season finale in Italy, beating a young Lewis Hamilton in both races, and vaulting from 8th to 1st at the first corner in the sprint race. Despite missing 6 races, he still ranked 5th, and had he ran the whole season with the form he showed in the final 6 rounds, he would have been in the top 3 once more. To many, it was clear he was amongst the cream of the crop when it came to junior series racing, as reflected by the fact that he became the first driver in either GP2 or Formula 3000 history to receive a salary. He moved across to Campos for 2007 and, as he had done so many times previously, took a struggling outfit by the scruff of the neck and dragged it kicking and screaming to the front. Across the previous 2 years, Campos had scored 19.5 points and finished second to last in the team's championship. In 2007, Pantano alone scored 59 points, won 2 races and ranked 3rd overall. Heading into his 7th second-tier campaign, the veteran joined yet another midfield operation in racing engineering and was declared the class of the field, as 4 wins were enough to trump the rising Brazilian pairing of Bruno Senna and Lucas de Grassi and secure a long overdue title. At Silverstone, he won his 14th race in F1's feeder championship, surpassing a 20-year-old record by Mike Thackwell, and extended the record to 15 at the next round at Hockenheim. As of 2024, no other driver has surpassed his total. The title was his, and so here was the chance for redemption and a welcome wave on through to the road back to F1. Not only did no such drive come along, but Giorgio wasn't even invited to a test session. Predecessors Rosberg, Hamilton and Glock had all swiftly been promoted to F1, making Giorgio the first GP2 champion to fail to make the grade, and the first from the second tier since Wertheim in 2003. Of the 12 GP2 champions in its history, he was one of only 3 to never subsequently graduate to F1 and the only one to fail to secure even a testing role. Meanwhile, the cluster of names that ranked below Giorgio, Senna, Di Grassi, Grosjean, Maldonado, Buemi, Petrov and Chandhok, all got into F1 within the next 3 years. Partly to blame was a case of rotten timing. Champion he might be, but there was simply no seats at the table in one of F1's most static off-seasons. The previous year, at least 7 different seats had shuffled about. For 2009, just 2, as Red Bull's retiring David Coulthard was replaced by Toro Rosso's Sebastian Vettel. That left the only real vacancy at Vettel's old seat, which was filled unsurprisingly, if jarringly for Pantano, by Red Bull junior Buemi, who had ranked 5 places behind Giorgio. Any other opportunities would have required turfing out considerably better backed prospects. Money shouldn't matter if a champion driver is available, says logic. That leads us on to the main issue for Giorgio, the public Pantano opinion. At 29, he was older than 14 of the 20 drivers who had started the final race of the 2008 F1 season, hardly the young, fresh talent that F1 teams were seeking. Others had doubts over his work ethic and application, citing a belief that he didn't know how to set up a single-seater, driving around a car's problems rather than adapting and improving it. And that does track, given a habit of dragging a variety of junior outfits kicking and screaming to the front, whilst his teammates would flounder. There were question marks too over how crushing his performance was. After winning 4 of the first 6 feature races, he never won again, and eyebrows were raised over how close Lucas Di Grassi came to beating him to the title despite missing the opening 3 rounds. Perhaps the final nail in the coffin came when Ron Dennis was queried about the GP2 field. The McLaren mogul simply sneered, "There's no phenomenal talent there." That is at odds with other opinions of the time. Racing engineering founder Alfonso de Orleans Bourbon said of Pantano, along with Vettel, Giorgio was by far the best driver we ever had. In 2009, Vettel was winning F1 races, but for Pantano that was nothing but a pipe dream. As he recounts, for me to win GP2 was a disaster, because nothing happened. I can't race in GP2 again because I'm the champion. So put me in F1, and if I'm not in F1, then let me race in GP2. Neither series opened their doors. He was heavily linked to the new Campos F1 effort for 2010, given his prior ties there, but was once more passed over in favour of younger, better funded options in Senna and Chandhok, both of whom he had beaten in the GP2 days. With that, the last faint hopes of an F1 return were extinguished. The remainder of his single-seater days saw him settling for either bit-part drives in IndyCar to middling and underwhelming support series with names like AutoGP or Super League Formula. Will Buxton described the sight of Pantano plying his trade in a series with cars decked out in various football kits as like watching Picasso creosote fences. 2 words stick out like a sore thumb in this story. So and what? The tale of junior series prodigy failing to make it in the big leagues is an oft-repeated, copy-pasted script, like yet another entry into the MCU. Previously, we've covered narratives like the saga of Suspiri or the ballad of Bourdais, another 2 talented junior champions who never got a fair crack at the F1 whip. What is it that sets this tale apart from those before and those to come? It may seem obvious to say, but the protagonist. Suspiri, Bourdais, they were good, but neither were the benchmark in the lower categories the way that Pantano was. If you wanted to get to F1, you had to get past him, says Glenn Freeman on Breback V10s. He was the end-of-level boss. Pantano won more second-tier races than any other had done or has ever done. He dragged midfield operations from no-hopers to championship challenges. He raced with and beat names like Hamilton and Rosberg. And if Formula Keith didn't contain the bizarre ruling of not allowing champions to return to the series, he surely would have added even more titles and triumphs to that impressive resume. I think there are some people who hate me because I'm too quick, laments Giorgio. In all my career, I won everything. Wherever I went, apart from F1, I won in every category. You need to tell me who in F1 has my CV. Nobody. So why am I not in Formula 1? We can circle back to what we've discussed already. There's the bit part season with Jordan, an underfunded team, bad car, yardstick of a highly motivated and talented teammate, and minimal testing to both learn the car and adapt on Formula 3000. Unsurprisingly, Pantano has said if he'd known the full picture, he never would have signed there. Alas, he did, and at an outfit with more problems afoot than the play that goes wrong, things were always destined to go pear-shaped and make matters on the driving front appear much worse than they perhaps really were. Then that does fail to explain why his replacement Glock, graduating from a division lower than Pantano and with even less time in the car, didn't suffer to the same extent. We could ride the blame train into the station of F1's secondary division. As Formula 3000, it was an outdated, ill-equipped series that failed to prepare its stars for an F1 future. And no amount of name changes can hide the sheer number of champions who have been stubbornly ignored by Formula 1, while those further down the rankings jump their place in the queue. Rather than rewarding Giorgio's accomplishments, it seemingly punished them. But then how does one explain why the 3 drivers who won the title before him, and the 3 after, all made it to F1 and enjoyed lengthy spells there even to this day? In my eyes, the fault then lies with Pantano. Clearly a very talented individual when it comes to the junior categories, the plethora of praise from drivers and journalists alike have attested so. But just being a karting champion doesn't guarantee that form will carry into F1. To scan a list of junior world karting champions, we'll find names like Giorgio Pantano, Fernando Alonso and Charles Leclerc, but equally a host of others that read less of a who's who and more of a who's that. Talent is only a small part of the equation. For what it's worth, I think Pantano could have been on the same level as Leclerc or Alonso, but was let down by an inability to seize the moment. How often have we discussed how numerous opportunities came and went for Giorgio? We discuss links to the likes of Benetton, Williams, McLaren, Ferrari, Prost, Jaguar and Minardi, none of which gave him the time of day. Digging into the details, we know it's not as simple as Giorgio being impressive or unimpressive. A lack of offers can be explained away by the fact that some of those were tabloid rumours, unserious propositions, or involved dealing with Flavio Briatore. Trouble is, once you're being turned down by your umpteenth team, an opinion begins to form of you. Take a look at Mick Schumacher, formerly hot property but having missed out on chances at Haas, Williams and Alpine. One wonders whether F1 Supremos don't read into that. If someone was really special, others would be fox smashing doors down to get their signature, rather than letting them go. One closed door can lead to many others slamming shut on that basis alone. But Pantano failed to help matters by the way he approached those opportunities. To illustrate what I mean, let's fast forward to the 2024 Italian Grand Prix. Andrea Kimi Antonelli exits the pits for his first free practice outing, and from the get-go it's clear that here is someone with a balls-to-the-wall, flat-out mentality, from the approach to Prima Variante to the enormous mistake at Parabolica mere minutes later. It was the epitome of carelessness, but damn if it wasn't exciting. It got people talking, analysing and hypothesising over the kid's potential. Those 1.5 laps may be some of the most scrutinised laps in F1 history. Pantano, meanwhile, was always more cautious, slowly building towards that speed and confidence, and if forced to do so without that certainty, then stepping over the line. Yes, with Jordan that was in part due to a lack of time in the car, but the same approach can be found throughout his years. At his 2002 Williams test, he admitted, "I was not driving at my maximum because I did not want to make any mistakes." And one wonders if a similar approach with Benetton and McLaren explains an initial 4-second deficit with one and a thoroughly unimpressed other. Adam Cooper reflects a similar consideration at the end of 2004. He's not the sort of guy to set the world alight first time out. Therein lies the second parallel between the two Italians. Excitement for Antonelli, whereas as Jonathan Williams put it after that 2002 test, overall it was positive, but there's always the argument that if you were uber impressed, you might be moved to make something of it. Clearly he was very talented, but we just didn't go on to develop a role from the test. Giorgio could have been not just the Junior Series benchmark, he could have been the same in F1 if only the sport gave him a little more patience and a little more time. But F1 is a dog-eat-dog world. At any time, there's 20 or so junior drivers swarming at your heels, ready to sink their teeth in should you stumble even briefly. Witness how quickly and regularly the rumour mill kicks into action over an upcoming driver swap just a handful of races into a season, or the multitude of names linked with a race seat should it become vacant. F1 is the fastest sport in the world, and there's never time to take your time. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, consider pulling into the pit box of my channel, bolting on the tyres of hitting that subscribe button, and tearing off the fresh visor of hitting the like button. I've had word from the pit wall that it's the best strategy available for you.